circling back to Saylor a little bit here, what are your thoughts with his wide range of possibilities, just price, 3 million to 13 million to 45 million? How do you see this? Let's take it this cycle first. I mean, where do you see things headed over the next 6 to 12 months? I mean, everyone, with bated breath is kind of like, okay, what's going to happen here? Like, what do you see happening this year, this cycle? And then we'll extrapolate it out in a minute.
All right. I'm pulling up my phone here because I want to look at what is the Berkshire stock at.
No.
Not the B shares. Okay. So the A shares, the class A shares of Berkshire Hathaway, right? There's people that were getting into Berkshire Hathaway in the 70s and the 80s and 90s at $100, $200, $300 because they've never split these shares. The price of Berkshire Hathaway class A shares are sitting at $770,660.
Wow.
Right? Like that, and so when you think about the amount of price appreciation, when you think about where the number of Bitcoin could actually be, $13.5 million is just not a crazy number. It sounds crazy from where we are today.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But when you think about the returns and the amount that just regular stocks have gone up, best performing stock of the last 20 years, everyone talks about Apple and Microsoft, and yeah, sure, Nvidia is up there now, but it's been like Monster energy drinks. Like, what utility have they provided other than 13-year-olds staying up all night on LAN parties playing Halo? Like, what value have they brought to the world? And then when you think about this global asset like called Bitcoin, and it being a $13.5 million asset, I think that's like honestly really small. I think people are thinking of what will happen in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. But Amazon went public in 95, 97, and now it's a $2 trillion company. Like, we're going to see Bitcoin 10x, 20x, 30x, 40x, 100x from here. I don't see that as a crazy thing. His price predictions are spot on because the first wave that he was on was the mobile wave. Then it was the cloud wave. And now he's seeing this Bitcoin wave, which is better than any technological wave, because the thing that he understood is that if you don't have the most resources, if your cost of capital is cheaper than mine, then eventually you will be able to hire more talent. You'll be able to build more product faster. You'll be able to hire more salespeople. You'll be able to build more integrations. Your company is eventually going to get outcompeted by the big 5 tech companies in whatever lane that you're getting into. You want to build a productivity tool? Good luck. There's this thing called Microsoft Word, Microsoft Office, Microsoft Excel. You have no chance. If you want to build business intelligence, good luck. Salesforce gobbled up Tableau like, just some random tuck-in acquisition. You think you're going to outbuild Microsoft BI or Salesforce in the next decade? Probably not. And Google acquired Looker, right? I'm just getting super nerdy here on some of this BI stuff. But like, whatever lane or angle that you're in, you don't have a big enough moat. You can't acquire capital cheap enough. And so Saylor realized he spent all of this time building mobile apps and mobile app companies and business intelligence and all of these sorts of things, only to realize there's a short-term window and advantage before the big players get in. So I have to get into an industry or a niche or a place that they're not going to get into, which is Bitcoin. I think he's testing Microsoft. He said another thing about Microsoft the other day, why they should buy Bitcoin. And they're just not going to buy it. He's like, great. More of an angle for me to get in here before you guys get a chance to, and no one's going to catch him. No one's going to catch MicroStrategy. They're the 14th largest company in terms of balance sheet in the world. They're top 90 in terms of market cap. We're going to see them in the top 10. And you know what? It had nothing to do with a technological or product advantage. It had everything to do with seeing what the next wave was and them getting on it. So 13.5 million, he's seen it before. Like, if anybody knows what's going on, it's him. People don't give him credit, Brandon. He's, I think, the longest active, now that Warren Buffett is stepping down, I think he's the longest active and most tenured publicly traded officer in the world. I think there's Warren Buffett and then there's him. So who's seen more markets than Michael Saylor out there? Nobody. I trust him. I trust 13 and a half.
Incredible. What do you think the Bitcoin? I mean, obviously the Coinbase stuff, whatever, paper Bitcoin, it's like all, we went from core wars and op returns like a week ago, and now it's just like, rage about, paper Bitcoin, and it's something new every day. Do you think price, I mean, it's weird saying it above 100,000, like price is suppressed, but do you think there's anything at play there?
100%. Like I'm ready. I'm like super willing to put on my tinfoil hat. I'm 100% willing to play that game. So when you look back at last year, right, you look at the amount of Bitcoin that the ETFs purchased. I think now collectively across the ETFs, it's about 6% of the total Bitcoin supply. And when you think about MicroStrategy, now they own 568,840 Bitcoin, something like that, somewhere in that range. And so they were the most aggressive buyer from August of 2020 until today. And only they've been able to acquire a few percentage points of the network. And so the tinfoil hat theory. If no one in the world was buying more Bitcoin than MicroStrategy, and they only have a few percentage points, and the ETFs were able to acquire 6 to 7% of the total supply, well, that's about 8 to 9% of the total network. When you look at what's happening on chain, of the OGs that have that amount of Bitcoin, the original Bitcoiners, right? The whales, who's selling 9% of the network? I don't see it on chain. Maybe I'm missing it. I subscribe to Checkmatey and the Check on Chain, his on chain analytics. I haven't seen 9% of the supply of Bitcoin move in the last year to year and a half. So if you look out at the run rate of just the ETFs alone, we're not even going to go to other asset classes, corporations, companies, XYZ. If they get to 10% run rate of the Bitcoin network in next year at the same run rate that they're at, let's say there's no acceleration, 15% of the network in 2 to 3 years, that means that of this supply, the OGs and people who've been in Bitcoin a while are willing to sell 10% of the network at $100,000 or less. I call BS on that. So if anybody wants to give me the math and tell me how this actually works, if there isn't some sort of IOU on Bitcoin, it doesn't make sense. Who is selling them this supply? If we're just going let's just extrapolate out a year or 2 years or 3 years, they own 20% of the network. That means that the OG Bitcoiners will have wanted to displace 20% or 30% of their stack at 100 grand. Doesn't add up to me. So I don't know, maybe someone's willing to go to war or debate with me on where all this is moving and how it's moving, but I don't think the math works.
What do you think the price, and maybe you haven't gone this far down the road, but what do you think it should be? Are you a Samson guy or Samsonite? Are you Samsonite? Where it should be 200,000 right now? Where do you think it makes more sense that we should be at right now?
It's hard for me to live in the land of where it should be, because honestly, I think there's probably other valuations that I would put onto it. Like when you look at the amount of kind of excess capital that's in real estate or other markets, I think we could easily be at $200,000. But speaking specifically, what happens in financial markets, what you saw the other day, we had this run back above $100,000, and then we dipped back to 99, and then we jumped right back to 103,000. And there's these massive candles that happen, ironically, when the market crashed and then when it rebounded. I think it's just leverage. I think it's derivatives. I think this is the game that happens when you get into TradFi, where there's money that can move behind closed doors. There's paper derivatives. There's leverage products that can suppress a price above or below a certain level. And it's hard for me to know or to understand really why the price isn't a little bit higher than it is. One of the things I do subscribe to the Checkmatey approach, in that we skipped that bubble from 70 to like 85. We literally went from like 70K like up to 90 in like a blink of an eye. And so there's a large amount of people that came in between $90,000 and $100,000 who were out of the money for the past several months. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the sell action and why we dipped back below to that like 80K level was a lot of these people who just aren't into Bitcoin, who don't understand Bitcoin, that were selling kind of paper hands. And so that's kind of why we refilled there. But as far as the upside from 95 to 109, I feel like we could or should be higher, but I don't know.
What do you think? So, I mean, extrapolate that out, because I think some people might say, well, yeah, I mean, if it goes up to, diminishing returns, they feel like, well, yeah, if it goes up to 500, we might have a crazy drawdown back to 100 or, whatever. If we're refilling and having people having this drawdown from 105 to back down to like 80, and people are that papered handed where they can't even stomach, a 10,000, 20,000 drop. What's it going to be like when it's going from 500 to a 200 or a million down to 300? Like, what does that look like to you?
Man, I think we're seeing decreasing volatility in Bitcoin. I think the upside volatility, who knows? Like, I think it's still a bit muted, but certainly I think that the downside volatility is going to continue to shrink over time. So when you think about a lot of the individual buyers that are able to make the moves in Bitcoin, let's say mid-quarter, midday, mid-afternoon, right? Bitcoin's pumping, Bitcoin's crashing. I'm able to go into my River app or my Swan app or Strike and hit the sell button, right? But when you're dealing with institutions that have quarterly filings, when you're dealing with publicly traded companies that have disclosures and have to move a large amount of capital, the money doesn't move that fast. And so the other thing that you get is the more that we are relying on Bitcoin as the store of value, the less that governments, institutions, and regular players will allow it to go down. That's why the S&P 500 will never crash. You know why? Because every financial advisor out there is relying on the S&P 500 staying above 4,700, right? Every retiree is relying upon the S&P 500 to live out their retirement and be able to draw down on their savings in their retirement vehicles. Every single person in America, every fund manager, every index is relying upon the S&P 500 continuing to go up. So in the event that it does crash 20 to 30%, the breakers go on. We can't have it go down 50% because it is the store of value. It has a network effect of that. I need it to stay here as much as my neighbor needs it to stay here, as much as my guy on the soccer team needs it to stay here, as much as the guy down the street needs it to stay here. And that's sort of the social effect that the S&P 500 has had. And so once we get a little bit further out into Bitcoin, once we go into a $10 trillion asset class, a $20 trillion asset class, we're not going from 1 million to 200,000 because there's going to be too many people relying on it as a store of value.
If you like that clip, then you definitely got to check out this next spicy clip. I think you're really going to like it. Come on, check it out. But if you want the full version, the full interview, then check that out over here. Come on, do it. I'll see you in there.